Hi, welcome to Books in Action. This is Larry Petricaro. I'm here with Jen Latimer. Jen and I have had one chance to do an interview already, and we were talking about children's librarians, elementary school librarians, and the importance of books and reading and librarians for the kids. And we had a really wonderful conversation, but we never got to everything we wanted to talk about. So I thought we'd have, and Jen agreed, that we'd have a follow-up interview so we could maybe explore a couple of other things. And I was watching TV the other day, and I heard Ken Burns say something like the book was the greatest mechanical invention of all time. And you know, if you think of books, you think of words on the paper and all, but then I realized, yeah, it opens, it closes, fairly easy to operate. But I thought he was right. And I had some friends who wrote a book called 1,000 Years, 1,000 People. And what they were trying to do, this was at the turn of the millennium, just the beginning of the year 2000. The 1,000 years prior to that, they wanted to look at and try to quantify the impact that different people had on us today. And number one on their list was Gutenberg, the inventor of the printing press. So here we've got, you know, Ken Burns talking about the greatest invention of all time being the book, and 1,000 people, 1,000 years. Gutenberg being the most influential person in that period of time because of the book. So it's had a pretty long run. But I wonder now, you have Kindles, you have social media, you have so many ways to get information. If the internet and social media and so on have had an impact on what you have to do with the kids and how the kids react to that.
Absolutely. The short, easy answer is yes, technology has absolutely affected us, impacted us, and we don't know what tomorrow will bring. We always say, like, it's a new day. I will say, if to anyone who ever wonders if the book is dead, which I get asked that quite often, right? We have the internet, why do we need books? I say spend a moment in a children's library, and you will realize the joy, the physicalness of the book has not waned at all, right? The ability to hold a book. You can have it in your desk, you can have it in your backpack, you can pull it out anytime. It doesn't need to be charged. But that being said, ebooks, audiobooks have really allowed more children access to information, especially coming off this, I hope I can say coming off the pandemic or coming to a different phase of this time. Our library collection grew in ways we would not have imagined a few years ago. We now have thousands of electronic books and audiobooks for children to take out. And they have computers, they can have instant access, and everybody has access to it. I usually have on any given day 70 books checked out to children. They read them online, they read them on Kindles, every way possible. Listen to them on car trips, right? Back and forth. Parents will tell me, oh, we downloaded this book and we listened to it when we went to grandma's house. So to me, that's exciting. So the book is just evolving, but it's still, an extremely important and very popular form of entertainment and knowledge.
Oh, and knowledge.
Knowledge getting.
When you said they could listen to the books, that's an audiobook, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or okay, so it's not like...
So we have interactive ebooks.
No,
That's really interesting also.
No, what is that?
So you can, so publishers have taken the traditional ebook, right, traditional book, turned it into an ebook, but then they also have the narration built right in there. Some will also highlight the word as you go. So if you have a child who really wants to read this book, and it might just be a little bit more tricky for them than, if they were picking up it in print, all of a sudden they can read along with the narrator, right? They can turn off that feature if they don't like it anymore. They could just start reading it on their own. But if they read a sentence and they don't understand 100% what they're reading, they can turn the audio feature on, and in a natural voice, right? They have a paid actor to read. They can read the words on the page. So for any student who is a hesitant reader, has any sort of actual reading disability, this just is a game changer.
It's interesting because last time we talked a little bit about graphic novels and how that had a positive impact on kids who might be dyslexic or else for self-confidence. So again, this is another example of a book, in this case an ebook, being a vehicle to help kids with self-confidence, help learn to read?
And I think back, I had a tape player, right? I could listen to tapes. I had a record player. Today's version is a child who has the computer with what we call Mac and Via in our school district, and with a button or two, they can push it, and they could hear an audiobook read to them. They can, children, a lot of children want to read Harry Potter, right? Harry Potter.
Yeah.
And Harry is like a fifth grader when you meet Harry. So I understand the connection to them. They want to read someone who's like them. But it takes a certain reader to be able to read that in elementary school for where I am. I read it out loud, the entire series. It took me a year of my life with my son, and we read the entire series out loud because he really wanted to be part of the conversation. There are elementary kids who can read Harry Potter. Fine. They're going to take what they can get, and, there's nuances to what they understand out of the storyline. But if all of a sudden you listen to, say, Jim Dale read Harry Potter, and he is a professional reader, they can now go into school. It's like the water cooler moment, right? Like when you think of the traditional water cooler at an old work story experience, people want to be part of the conversation. They want to be able to talk with people. Kids want to go to school, and if somebody starts talking about, oh, you remember that part in the book? If you're a struggling reader and you can't be part of the conversation, you feel other. But now you have an audiobook, you can be part of that conversation. And maybe someday you'll come back and you'll want to read it again. I've read Harry Potter twice, so, and I'm an adult reader. But I do enjoy that sometimes it's really I find it as an equalizer, right? It gives kids access that they might not have had before. And thank you, technology, for that. So
Always. I guess it can be a blessing and a curse. This is one of the
always.
blessings. It's interesting you mentioned about Harry Potter because I've read them. I read all the books as well, and I've watched all the movies more than once. I think. But you mentioned that Harry starts in the 5th grade, and by the time he ends up, one of the things
he's in high school, right?
He's in high school, and one of the things I admired about the movies which are based on the books, was how the themes change. And we talked a little bit about this last time we talked, about our kids, how do they react to different levels of seriousness or different types of problems. And I'm just wondering, and this may be an unfair question, if you can recall, was the way that the first book written, was it different from the way the last book was written in terms of appealing to a different audience?
So that's it. Well, again, now it's been a few years since I've read
so
it the second time.
Unfair.
But the themes in the first book, and again, I don't want any spoilers for anyone watching this, but the theme of Harry and not having parents and building relationships, or trying to build relationships with his aunt and uncle, starting a new school experience, making new friends. That is going to be different than him developing love, right? Him leaving school, having to become an adult, basically battling evil, right, in the last one. I think thematically it gets darker.
Yeah.
I often said my dream scenario is for a child who wants to read. Obviously, you don't need to read Harry Potter to be in the world, but I'm a huge Harry Potter fan, so I would love it if you could read it in the 5th grade, and then every year, you could grow with Harry. That would be my dream situation, because then it's so close to your own life experience.
Yeah, I think that's...
that doesn't happen, but, again, a librarian can wish and dream.
Why not? I would imagine they would just read, all of them at once, probably, if they...
And look, I have 6-year-olds who have said to me, I've read it all, Mrs. Latimer. I'm done the series. Okay. And I often will say, I hope maybe someday when you're older, you'll go back to it. I read it again. I read it out loud to a child who was perhaps 8 years old, and there were key moments of the story plot line, and there was no emotion when I got to parts of it, and I was sobbing, and he was like, Mom, why are you so upset? And because he didn't have certain life experiences that this was going to tap into.
Yeah, well, that goes back again to what we talked about before. Maybe parents shouldn't feel so afraid of those kinds of themes, because it's going to be seen, as you said, through a different lens. That's the way you look at it.
and I thought about this because I knew we talked about this. I went to my own bookshelf, and I have The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Again, one of my all-time favorite books. I kept my original copy from the 4th grade. It has my little signature inside. I thought it was the most epic adventure story. And then I watched Disney's movie version, and I said, I don't understand what I'm watching. What is this? Because as a 4th grade me, I didn't understand the religious context of it. I didn't understand any of that. To me, it was kids going to a magical world and battling, good and evil and things. And I just thought that was cool. And then once I saw it on the screen, I was somewhat put off by it. I almost wish sometimes children didn't watch the movies as much and would just read the books, because sometimes it's so hard to not see that version. Right. Yeah. And not that the theme isn't there, it's definitely in the book, but it just changes it sometimes.
Yeah, well, I think the books are always better than the movies.
I do too.
In general.
I happen to be a fan of that books as well.
Well, talking about what we were talking about before, the technology, the internet, social media, and things of that nature, we didn't get into it a lot, but have you had to kind of learn as you go? And nowadays, if you were studying to be a librarian, is this part of the curriculum?
So library school is always evolving, right? They have to keep changing the courses they offer because of what the world is looking like. For me, there wasn't really a huge topic when I was in graduate school, and I learned on the job. So I started an Instagram account, and I share pictures of students' work with families, with the world, to give parents a sense of what we're doing, right? To show the depth of library learning. It's certainly, we're using the hashtag now, not your parents' library. The library experience study is nothing like what I had experienced when I was growing up. And I loved my library experience. But there's just such a different element of it today. We talk about, again, technology influences things. We have to talk about, where you find information online, what are good sources of information online. There's so much that we have to do. Social media, like what do you share, so I might not teach them how to use, TikTok, for example, but I do teach them about what it's like to take someone's photo and have permission to use it, right? Or what is it okay to take any old picture online that you see and use it in your project, right? You have to cite your sources, right? To hopefully plant some of those ideas so that they do go on social media, that they are maybe thinking just a little bit about what they post. The stop. We teach these lessons from Common Sense Media about stop and think before you post, right? Stop and think before you say, same thing as like before you say something, you should think about it. Yeah. Well, you should also think about it before you put it online, and how once you put things out there, you lose control over it. We are a Google-based school, so we use Google a lot. I teach them how to do a Google search, right? And I find Google resources to teach them. So I'm not going to tell you how to do a Google search. I'm going to have Google tell you how to do a Google search. How does their search engine work? And we talk about that ad nauseum, that Google's not a source. Google's like a road, right?
Well, that brings up an interesting question, but we're going to have to take a break. But I'd like to follow up on that when we come back. So if you'll stay with us, we'll be back in about a minute. And this is Larry Petricaro with Jen Latimer.
It's an onion.
Hi, welcome back to Books in Action. This is Larry Petricaro with Jen Latimer. And just before the break, we were talking a little bit about social media. And as Jen and I were talking, Jen was talking about how to get kids to use it responsibly, basically, or try to make them understand that there's a need to be responsible. But that brings up another aspect of technology, which is the internet and research. And how do you go about, or do you go about, trying to help kids evaluate what they come in? You said that, when it comes to doing a Google search, you'd prefer Google to tell them how to do the Google search, and I can understand that. But the information they get, do you help them with that to try to make some judgments just about how they should use it, or whether or not they should evaluate as true or untrue?
Absolutely. So one of the lessons is one of my favorite lessons we do every year is I deliberately show them a fake website. I don't tell them it's a fake website. Teachers love to use this one. And we read all about Mankato, Minnesota. And we talk about the warm winters that Mankato has and why, and it has real pictures and real words. Like it has all the things that make it look real. But in fact, it's completely false. And I have them fill out a worksheet while they're going along, like a little checklist. Does it have real pictures? How is the information laid out? Do the links go to places? Does it take a long time to load? And it's a two-sided thing. And it's amazing to me every year how many children say, this is so interesting. I never knew Minnesota was 75 degrees in the winter and Dracula was filmed there. And so, or tropical beaches. And then we slow down. And then I tell them that this was not a real website. And we compare it to two actual websites for the same town, one the community website and one the Tourism Bureau's website. And again, we go through and we show them how, I try to get them to think of the questions to ask themselves. Does it have real photos? But then also, what are the real photos of, right? Is the spelling correct? Can you find the author? Right? Can you find when it was last updated? There are a lot of websites out there that I tell children, it's not that they're purposely trying to trick them, but they're old. They're outdated. If you have questions, who do you contact? Right? Again, it goes back to who's the author of the website, who maintains it. And my hope is always, if I get them to kind of ask themselves those questions in their mind, then it's like taking me with them, right? When they are just out on their own, again, who's the audience? Right? A website can be fantastic, and today we used NASA Climate Kids website. I said, but let's not use NASA's website. NASA's website is just linguistically too much. It's too much text. It's too much. But we use the kids one because it's nicely spaced out, and it's meant for you, and it's meant to be readable and understandable, without having to really work at it. It shouldn't be so hard to understand the information. And so, yeah, we spend a lot of time talking about that in the hopes that it'll just become part of their routine.
Well, the fact that if they just remember that maybe all websites aren't true, I guess that's a step in the right direction. How do they react when you tell them it's fake?
Oh, there's a lot of you did what? And I said, it was it's not, and then some of them, they'll say oh, there's fake news out there. And I said, there is obviously information that's wrong out there, but there's also outdated. There's opinion pieces, and so the key is who's trying to provide this information and what is the ultimate purpose, right? So opinion pieces, editorial pages are fine as long as you understand what you're reading, right? Or are you just reading the facts? Because there is truth and there is opinion, and I just want to try to plant those seeds early. Look, adults struggle with this, clearly. So it's not like it's something that they're going to just get and never lose, but I really hope that by having these conversations, I'm confident by having these conversations, they are better prepared. But there's a lot more work that can be done.
Well, I imagine that's true at a national level as well. And but just the simple fact that they know just because they see it, it's not true.
Right.
I think it's too easy to believe what you see. So technology's had an impact, obviously, and we've talked about the Kindle, and you were saying that they can download books from there. So let's talk a little bit about books. How do we help kids pick books, and how do we, as a parent or a grandparent, how do you try to find something that's appropriate? I mean, do boys have different interests than girls, for example? What's age appropriate? We've been hearing that on TV a lot, but that's...
So we, you and I have had these conversations. We talk about this. We hit upon it last time. For every child is going to be different, right? So you can have a 10-year-old who reads like an adult, right? Who reads at a very high level. And so you want to give them a book that's challenging, but you also want to give them something that is topically within their age range. right? Like I don't, there's just topics they're not interested in, nor do they really need to be reading in the details as an adult reader. But also, I don't want to give them something that's so below their reading level that it's like insulting to them, right? They won't read it if it's too easy. It's this weird catch-22. What I try to do, because yes, you could talk about like what some boys read, what some girls read, but again, I can find an example that crosses, right? I could debunk that also at the same time. What I try to do is just listen to children. Right? I try to stop talking. If I talk too much as a child, I can convince them to read something. But that may not be of real interest to them. They get home and it's not really what they wanted. I love finding things like Jason Reynolds is a highly in demand fan of the school library. And he's come up with this new book with Raoul III, who coincidentally has been to Clinton, which is really exciting. But he writes this book for his 10-year-old self. And I like to think, here's a book about, a young boy who's dealing with some stuff, who it's written in a graphical form, but it also has, it has more of a traditional chapter feel at times. Mm-hmm. Not the fonts, right? Not the shading, not the boldness of it. Raoul III sort of has every page sort of has some sort of decoration on it. It's a great hybrid book, and it really does speak to certain children. I just listened to earlier in preparation for this an interview that Jason Reynolds did, and he discussed the fact that he writes for every child, but he also writes to Black children, mm-hmm. right? So they're universal themes of finding your place and bullies and being who you are, but he also understands what it's like to be a Black boy in the world. And so that's what I love, because it speaks to so many people. And it's so, again, the visual nature of it is so appealing. This to me is an exciting book to share with kids. And again, unfortunately, a lot of kids go through divorce. Like a lot of kids have issues with attention. So it's a book that universally applies to a lot of people. But also, I like to just listen to children and see. Like you and I talked before about like science. How do you find a good science book for kids?
That was one of the things I'd like to
right.
ask
And
you about.
Jason Chin is one of my favorite science writers because he doesn't do a traditional science book, a traditional nonfiction book, but he does these books that are just beautifully illustrated, but also have all this like the text features around here. So for some of my kids who are also what I call like the children who read world record books, fact books, right? They love lots of little hidden things. In this book, you have the main story, but you also have all the animals that live at this part of the Grand Canyon. You're also missing on many of these pages just a tiny piece of the page so that when you turn it, something else is popping through. So there's like a little detail, but then when you turn the page, you can see what, right? So it has this visual excitement, and it makes nonfiction just that much more interactive. Then you can take them online. He has an extensive back, part of the book where you get more details. And again, I love inviting children to think about this country we live in, right? Mm-hmm. Science, nature. My latest thing is apparently I'm on a tree kick because I'm fascinated how trees talk to each other. So I've been buying these books for kids to understand the planet. I love the end papers, right? I love authors who take up every bit of space on the book, including the end papers. So this is another way of it, like listening to children. You cannot, I know I'm going on a little bit, but you cannot just, the one thing I would ask parents to do, and anybody listening to this, is we try not to define child by their reading level, right? Teachers sometimes will figure out the reading level because they want to help them in class with their guided reading, right? So you're a level M on the Fontes and Pinnell scale or whatever. But then I'll have kids come to the library, I have to have a level M. And to me, I go, I don't know what that means. Let's just open some books. So we open the book. Can you read the first page? Every time you can't think of every time you don't know what a word is, put a finger up. Once you have 5 fingers up, maybe that's too hard, right? So because for every child who can only read at a certain level, I've seen those same kids try to read a dinosaur book. because they really want to, right? They're really determined. Or they're picture reading, right? And that's good. Picture reading is reading. Kindergartners are not going to read all the books in the library, but you should see how excited they get. They turn the pages, they see what's going on. They know what's happening, even though they can't traditionally read all the words in the page. So I'm really an anti-leveler. The library is really all about exploration and listening, right? Stop and just listen. Or find a librarian to help. The grandparents of the world, go to a bookstore, find a librarian. We do an awful lot of reading of professional guides to help us with the best books to have. And I read books, I read many books each week just to continue to just know what's going on.
Well, I like your concept of exploration.
Yeah.
I think that is so important, to attract that interest. I think back about when I would have been one of your students, and I went through dinosaurs, geography, early mammals, this whole bit. There was just something about them. But but Jason Chin, you mentioned, he writes others, or this is?
He does. No, he has a whole collection, and he's won awards for it. He won He wrote the story about the Galapagos Islands. The kids are fascinated with the Galapagos Islands. Then we go on Google Earth and we have to explore the Galapagos Islands because he gives you the life of an island, of a volcanic island.
Okay.
And that's really awesome. He has won, he wrote a book about the redwoods. So then I went to California to visit my brother, and I went to see the redwoods. So I took pictures, and then I came back to school and I talked about the redwoods. They were amazed.
Well, you tie technology in with it. It's interesting that you. It is just
he's
tie technology in with it.
He wins these awards because, again, he just has a very likable style of art. There are certainly other authors that we like as well, but I love to get down on kids' levels, right? And just to talk to them and listen.
Well, we have one.
Yes.
Let's talk about wishes.
So this one I had to bring. This is by Munti Van, and I thought this book was going to win this year the book award, the Caldecott. It did not, but it's still one of my favorite. And this was I thought about this after last time, and we talked about picture books, and we talked about who they're for. I read this to my fifth graders because my fifth graders talk about, the forming of the country and these big issues. They're very curious about immigration, and especially in light of what's happening in the world right now. This book is about refugees, and I'll just read it for a few pages. It says, "The night wished it was quieter. The bag wished it was deeper. The light wished it was brighter. The dream wished it was longer. The clock wished it was slower. And the boat wished it was bigger."
Interesting.
And I get goosebumps right now, even just reading this.
And the subtlety of the colors, or it gets that mood. But speaking of wishes, I wish we had more time.
I know.
But we don't. So we're going to have, but thank you again, Jen,
And
so
thank
much.
you. It is School Librarian Month, and I thank you for letting me
that's
talk
great.
about the magic of libraries.
So like technology, it blends in. And thank you for joining us on Books in Action.